For those who don't know Junji Ito, he's a mangaka that makes, well, horror mangas that usually have disturbing and morbid drawings. This is an anime series that compiles some of his most famous and macabre stories, so get ready to shit bricks because this is Junji Ito Maniac. The Bizarre Hikizuri Siblings. This story is starred by the Hikizuri siblings, Kazuya the older brother, Kinako the older sister, Shigoro the middle brother, Narumi the middle sister, Hitoshi the younger brother, and Misako the younger sister, for a total of 6 siblings. Because their parents died, Kazuya goes out to work every morning, and all of his siblings wave goodbye to him, but in reality, he's just acting to give them a good role model as an older brother. Since the Hikizuri family inherited a great fortune, while Kazuya fools around, he meets Sachio, a photographer of the supernatural, and invites her to take pictures of his backyard where he has a cemetery. Now, I don't know about you guys, this really reminds me of the Addams Family. They go to the backyard, the woman takes her pictures, and it seems that both Kazuya and Shigoro fell in love with Sachio. During dinner, they start to fight, insulting, yelling, crying, and everyone treats other like garbage. How beautiful. What a nice family. Since Misako cries because she misses her parents, Kazuya decides to have a seance with Sachio as a witness. But unlucky for him, she arrives with her boyfriend, and after a performance by the middle brother where his father possesses him, he names him as the older brother, leaving behind some ectoplasm, kinda like Ghostbusters. Since Sachio and her boyfriend took a sample of the ectoplasm, they discover that it was actually flour, and Kazuya finds out, so he kicks the shit out of Shigoro. But their fight is interrupted by the father's real spirit, who comes out of Hitoshu and chases them all over the house, until he arrives at his tomb in the backyard, where he then disappears. And that's that. Literally the end. And that's just how the story goes. I don't know. Don't ask me. The story of the mysterious tunnel. A group of boys decide to go explore a tunnel that, according to some stories, is haunted because for some reason, people are drawn to it. In this group of friends, we can find Goro, who lost his mother in that same tunnel when he was little. After arriving and seeing a human figure, the boys get scared and run away like the pussies that they are. But Goro realizes it's just Mari, his little sister, who doesn't remember how she got in the tunnel. Goro takes her hand and they leave, but after exiting the tunnel, he was alone. Nah, just kidding. After getting home and leaving the fever-ridden Mari to rest, Goro's father asks him to take good care of him, since he didn't tell her what happened to her mother in that tunnel yet. But the next day, Mari disappears, and her father goes to check out the tunnel. Goro goes too, but after arriving, he comes across his father's lantern lying on the floor, and then arrives at an observatory where his scared sister is next to some scientists. After unsuccessfully looking for his father and returning home, Goro receives a call from the observatory since his sister went back to the tunnel without realizing it. And after looking at some pictures, they notice that inside the tunnel, there are some kind of humanoid-shaped beams that look like ghosts. And they decide to close the observatory down because it was too dangerous to be near the tunnel for a long time. And yes, they're all drawn to the tunnel again. These people never really learn. It kind of seems like this tunnel is almost like some kind of SCP. However, this time the scientists and Goro's sister are swallowed by the tunnel, leaving pools of blood in its path. And while the corpses move along the ceiling and ask for help, they fall, only to be swallowed once again. Goro tries to escape, only to trip, and then see how his hands are sinking into the ground, until finally, the tunnel swallows him whole. The hanging balloons. The news tell us of something tragic. Apparently, a young idol took her own life by hanging herself from a light cable near her window, and all her companions go to her funeral. One of them is Kazuko, who lives with her parents and brother. It seems that after this girl's death, a lot of people claim to see her giant head floating around the city with a disturbing facial expression. If you didn't realize it by now, the guy who makes these stories has a weird concept of horror. Kazuko, tired of hearing everyone talking about rumors of her friend's ghost, goes to talk to the girl's boyfriend, who also says he saw her head. And at night, he calls Kazuko so she can see for herself. When Kazuko arrives where the guy was, she sees the head of her deceased friend floating alongside the head of boyfriend, from which hangs a rope that coils around the boy's neck, ending his life. The next day, while Kazuko was walking through the city with her friends and tells them what she saw, 4 giant heads with the faces of each of them descend from the sky and hang 2 of Kazuko's friends. She gets away with her other friend, but after asking a neighbor for help, he, out of nowhere, takes out a crossbow and shoots her friend in the head, who deflates with a horrible expression. And after looking at her friend, Kazuko sees how her face starts to deform just like the balloon and dies. After getting home and watching the news with her family and how they warn everyone to not leave their homes, Kazuko's dad, with his massive balls of steel, stands up and says that he has to go back to the office. Like, bro, there are gigantic killer heads floating all over your country and you just get up and go to your office. Literally zero IQ. Obviously, her father dies, hanged by this balloon, followed by her brother, who goes out looking for food, and then her mother, who simply gives up and goes out to meet her doom, leaving Kazuko alone. After locking herself in for a long time, and being harassed by her own head, who asks her to go outside, Kazuko hears her brother's voice asking her to open the door, that he's alive, he's brought food, and needs help to save himself. This makes Kazuko open the window, only to have her neck strangled by a rope. 4x4 walls. In a normal house, a kid called Koichi is studying in his room when he suddenly hears strange noises coming from the attic and blames his younger brother Soichi, a pretty weird kid that always bothers his brother by making noise when he tries to study. Tired of this, Koichi asks his dad to do something about it, and he calls a carpenter to make his room soundproof. If you thought his brother looked creepy, just look at the carpenter. He looks like a shaman that shrinks heads. To make it so that nothing can be heard, this guy makes a room inside a room, inside a room, inside a room, inside a room, making it so that there's only a small space where he can study. But he doesn't manage to do much since Soichi gets between the walls and keeps bothering him by making noise. Because his brother is the Joker, Koichi chases his brother between the walls to beat him up until he gives up and leaves Soichi alone until he runs out of oxygen. Did I ever tell you that while Koichi heard strange noises in the attic, his brother wasn't actually there? Where the Sandman lives, Yuji needs to stay awake. Why? To stop his alter ego from his dreams from escaping to the real world, of course. To do this, he asks her friend Mari for help so that she doesn't let him leave while he sleeps, tying up his hands and feet, even though Mari thinks he's seen things and just needs to rest. So, once he's asleep, she removes the tape and tucks him in so he sleeps well, until she also falls asleep. Suddenly, Mari wakes up after hearing some noise. An arm comes out of Yuiji's mouth and grabs her leg. Screaming, she asks him to wake up, and when he does, he swallows his arm again and puts it in his place. It seems that when Yuiji sleeps, the alter ego from his dreams is inside him, and he tries to escape by turning Yuiji's body because he wants to be with Mari. To try and save him, Mari takes Yuiji's hand and lets him sleep, being absorbed by his alter ego. Another day, someone comes looking for Mari, who was last seen with Yuiji, but after entering his flat, he was all alone with his flesh turned and his body had eaten her. Intruder. We meet 4 high school students, Kamiyama, Watanabe, Koizumi, and Oshikiri. The 4 of them are interested in paranormal things in alternate dimensions, and when they meet Oshikiri, he told them he lives alone in a very large house and he can frequently hear footsteps, even though there's nobody there. So they all go to his house to have a listen, and after checking every room, they find nothing until they suddenly hear someone run and leave the house. And after looking out the window, they see another Oshikiri burying a corpse. After seeing this, Oshikiri feels extremely disturbed and opens the window to shout at him. The other him turns around to look, makes fun of him, and vanishes, just like half of the Avengers. When they go downstairs, they realize that the corpse is Kamiyama's, and they notice that there are some markings on the ground. When they dig, they discover the corpses of Watanabe and Koizumi from another dimension, and so, for Oshikiri's sake, they decide to hide them again. Meanwhile, the other Oshikiri hears them from another place, waiting. The long hair in the attic. Who hasn't broken up with a couple with whom they've been together for a long time? What? No one? Well, of course, you are watching anime summaries all day. Well, that just happened to Chami. Even though they were together many years, she even let her hair get long for him. But oh well, everything must come to an end. The sad Chami cries herself to sleep, but after waking up, the rat that made a lot of noise in the attic appeared entangled in her hair, making her yell. While she's bathing, she decides it's enough, so she asks her sister Eri to cut her hair. But when Eri goes to look for some scissors, she hears a scream from Chami, and after going upstairs, she finds her all bloodied and headless. After some time, Eri realizes that she didn't hear the rat anymore, so she asks his father for a flashlight to go look for it, but her dad goes looking for it. Since he took a long time to come back, she looks for him and finds him frozen with a horrified stare. Her dad had died of a heart attack after seeing his daughter's hanging head. Eri sees how the disembodied head of her sister starts to flee, using her long hair, which is strong as steel cables. Days later, they find a department full of hair and blood, and also the corpse of a man cut into 1,000 pieces. He was Chami's ex-boyfriend. Mold. Akasaka just finished building his new house, but he has to go for a business trip outside the country. Knowing this, his brother Suiji tells him that his old teacher suffered an accident, his house burned down, and asks Akasaka to let him stay in his house until he comes back. When he returns, his house is a complete mess, with garbage everywhere. It seems that the teacher and his family left without saying anything, and left everything like this. After cleaning his whole house and without getting a drop of paint on anything, Akasaka realizes that his whole house is rotting and getting moldy, a mold that the teacher's baby had all over his body. As the days pass, the situation gets worse and roots start growing all over the fungus-infested house until Akasaka finds the decomposing and moldy bodies of the teacher and his family. With time, Akasaka starts feeling an itch all over his body. It seems to be some kind of fungus. Library of Illusions. A book lover called Goro lives with his girlfriend Coco in a house that looks like a giant library. This obsession seems to be deteriorating Goro's mind, since he starts to become crazy, like his mother's favorite book disappeared alongside his dad's favorite book. His mom's book, Wintertime for Rene, seemed to be a chill novel, while his father's Hellskin was, according to Goro, the scariest novel in the world. Goro's madness for these books reached a point where he started seeing them materialized like people that told their own stories. But Coco, after reading their diaries and seeing how his mother abandoned his father for having the same insanity, tries to help him and tells him to go see a doctor. Goro ignores her, and over time he becomes crazier and crazier. Finally, to not lose any more books, Goro decides to memorize all of them. Coco is gone. Now there's only him and his books. Suddenly, a lamp falls between one of the piles of books, and the whole library burns down, with Goro inside, leaving only memories behind. Toontown. Tsuyoshi and his sister Kaoru are going down the road directly to a town to visit a friend, but because of a distraction, Tsuyoshi runs over a girl that was in the mountains and decides to hide her in the trunk of his car. After arriving at the city, they see it's a strange place, since the people that die there are turned to stone and then into a gravestone right on the place where they lost their life. After the friend Izumi shows them the town covered in tombstones everywhere, we see that she's worried because her younger sister didn't come back home after playing in the mountains. And of course, Izumi's sister is the corpse that is in the trunk of Tsuyoshi's car. After the whole town goes looking for her, Tsuyoshi and his sister leave the town to leave Izumi and her family alone, and to also hide the body. When they open the trunk, the girl's half-decomposed, half-petrified corpse emanates a horrible smell. They don't know it, but those who cannot turn into a gravestone and rest in peace will haunt whoever didn't allow the transformation to happen and curse them. After throwing the girl's heavy body down a well, Tsuyoshi accidentally cuts his hand and has a vision of the stone corpse accusing him. And so, they run away, leaving the town behind. But some days later, stone begins to form on Tsuyoshi's wound until it consumes his entire body. In the end, there are only 4 gravestones left, one for Tsuyoshi and the other 3 for Izumi and her parents, who took their own lives. Layers of Fear. In 1996, an excavator finds what seems to be an ancient ritual alongside the skull of a child, which he picks up without knowing it will unleash a curse. Now in 2017, it has been 9 years since the passing of Reimi's father, and she, her sister and mother were on her way to her dad's anniversary, but because of an accident, the beautiful Reimi has parts of her face hanging. After arriving at the hospital, they discover something very strange. Under Reimi's skin, there was still a face. And not only that, but she was also made of different layers. She didn't have organs or a brain, only layers of skin, just like her older sister. After recovering, Reimi yells at her mom and blames her for the accident. Since Reimi's mother was completely insane and misses when her daughter was 2 years old, she decides to peel her skin off, layer by layer while she sleeps, asking for help of her oldest daughter. But after removing everything, all that remains is the face of a 2-year-old Reimi with an elongated and deformed body. Thinking that she suffered the same curse as her 2 daughters, the woman cuts her face to go back to a younger layer of skin, ripping off her own face and leaving the flesh and muscle of her face exposed. Now, the older sister has to take care of her faceless and traumatized mother and her 2-year-old sister with a rotting and elongated body. The thing that drifted ashore. 7 years ago, Mie lost her fiancé, Tadashi, on a coast with multiple people. They all disappeared. Now, a strange creature drifted ashore, a fish as large as a whale, whose body has some kind of windows on it, where a bunch of human bodies are found. After opening the creature's stomach, all the bodies fall out, and surprisingly, they're alive. They act like zombies, or rather parasites, and among them is Tadashi. Tomiya's photo. Tsukiko is a high school student who is part of the photography club. and takes advantage of this to take pictures of her classmates and sell them for a good price to people that ask for them. One day, the boy she likes asks her for a photo of the new girl, Tomie, who some days earlier discovered her illegal business and threatened with telling the director. While Tsukiko secretly takes pictures of Tomie, a teacher discovers her and she's suspended from school. After revealing the photos, a horrible monster coming out of Tomie's head was visible, and as a way to take revenge, Tsukiko distributes them all over the school, making Tomie so furious she wants to kill her, sending the boy Tsukiko was in love with her to kill her because, well, he's in love with Tomie but doesn't succeed in killing Tsukiko. Once she's at home, her mother leaves and Tsukiko's left alone, and in that moment, Tomie and her two bodyguards arrive. She plays nice and says she wants to make amends, but Tsukiko doesn't believe her and calls her a monster and a sicko, causing her anger to bring out the demon inside Tomie. She asks the two boys that accompanied her for help, but they tie Tsukiko up and start attacking Tomie with their machetes, but they accidentally decapitate her. While they're planning to kill Tsukiko because she saw the whole thing, the tumor in Tomie's disembodied head is still asking for them to cut her and take her away in a bag with a face, leaving the headless body in Tsukiko's room. But this doesn't end here, because her body gets up with a mini head that was starting to grow and it runs away from the house. Tsukiko simply unties herself and assumes it was all a dream. Cool, now you just have to clean up the walls covered in blood. Unendurable Labyrinth. Sayako and Noriko were hiding in the mountains when they find a large Buddhist cult walking around, and since they were lost, they offer them to spend the night in the temple. There, they meet Kuramoto, who is infiltrated there to look for his brother who disappeared years ago after joining the cult. At night, it seems that an important ritual will take place, where 100 men mummify themselves, and with the hope of finding Kuramoto's brother, they decide to follow them and find a hidden door behind a statue of Buddha. Once they enter, they find a long labyrinth with a row of mummies on each side, until they finally find Kuramoto's brother, who was among the mummies. And since she asks them to leave her alone, Sayako and Noriko start looking for the exit, but it's impossible. They're lost. And also, for some reason, the mummies don't stop staring intently at Sayako. Bullied. In this story with extremely saturated colors, Kuriko meets Naoya, a boy that just moved in, and because he doesn't know anyone, his mother asks Kuriko, who was alone, to play with him in the park. At the beginning, they get along well, but Kuriko starts to get bored and begins bothering Naoya, a situation that gets worse as time goes on. She pulls on his ears, drowns him, and even threw him to a dog that almost killed him. It seems that the sadistic Kuriko really enjoyed it. Years later, we see how Naoya forgives Kuriko, and they fall in love, and they even have a son that is very similar to Naoya when he was little. This reawakens some memories from the past in Kuriko, and once again, she feels the need to bully. Back alley. Ishida moves in as a tenant to the house of a lady who lives with her 14-year-old daughter Shinobu. At night, he hears noises in the alley that's next to the house, but when he takes a look, he sees nobody there. Sometime later, a man who was also a tenant in that house warns Ishida of what the alley is hiding. He tells him there's a hatch that leads underground, and on the walls, the shadows of the dead can be seen. Even though he doesn't believe him, Ishida finds the window from where the old tenant could see everything and descended on a rope, confirming that there were corpses and shadows there. But when he tries to go back up, Shinobu appears with a knife, and the boy falls into the alley again. Shinobu tells him that she was the one who buried 3 children underneath the floor in that alley, and then killed 2 of her classmates and her father, leaving each of their shadows on the wall. And at night, their spirits leave the wall to curse Shinobu, and that's why she tries not to go to the alley at night. Before Shinobu finishes her story, Ishida passes out on the floor, and when Shinobu goes down the rope to kill him, the rope gets cut, and it starts to go dark. Headless Statue. Okabe is an old sculptor and art teacher that mostly dedicates himself to creating headless statues. One day, one of his students called Shimada stayed up until late with him to help him, and his friend Rumi shows up to say hi. The next day, when Rumi goes to school, her friends tell her that Professor Okabe was murdered and beheaded. Suspecting that Shimada was responsible, she goes looking for him at his house, and when he goes outside, he looks a bit strange. He says that the teacher is alive and is hiding, and so they go to see him at the art room where the professor died. But before they can find him, a door opens, revealing Okabe's disembodied head. When Rumi and Shimada arrive, he shows her how the teacher's head was attached to a statue, and now he wants Rumi's head. Desperate, she slaps him, and Shimada's head falls off since he was also a sculpture. Rumi desperately runs all over the school while she's being chased by the statues, but when she tries to hide, she finds a bunch of statues fighting for her friend's head. And now, it's time for Rumi to surrender hers. Whispering Woman. Sadly, Miss Mitsu finds herself in a delicate situation. She lives with an unemployed man named Aga who beats her, takes her money, and forces her to work. She applies for an important job, helping the daughter of a powerful man, a girl called Mayumi, who is always asking what to do and suffers a lot of stress. After a while, Miss Mitsu does a great job with Mayumi. She's always by her side, whispering to her what to do. Although with time, Miss Mitsu looks more and more deteriorated, with bruises and following Mayumi everywhere, almost like a zombie. One day, when they find out that Miss Mitsu passed away in her house, and the main suspect is Aga. Due to Miss Mitsu's death, Mayumi's father gets worried because now there's nobody to help his daughter. But Mayumi still hears whispers that tell her what to do. And one night, Mayumi gets home covered in blood. Miss Mitsu had whispered to her to kill Aga, Soichi's beloved pet. Remember Soichi? Well, in this story, we see that he doesn't like his family's cat, since it's too nice, I guess. And thanks to a curse, the cat starts hunting increasingly weirder animals and insects. The cat became so strange that every time it got closer and closer to Soichi, but it seems that the cat was so cursed that he's able to shoot lightning like Pikachu and electrocute Soichi, leaving him even more dead than the mummies we saw in the previous story. Thanks to this electric shock, it seems that this poor cat went back to normal. Or did it?